Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. Buddhism brings to the monastery, brings people to the teachings of great variety of people. And it appeals to such a broad range of personality types. Sometimes I think, people come to the monastery, and here tonight there's 30 people or so, and including 15 or 20 monastics and resident community members. And, what brings us to Buddhism, for the most part, I think for most of us, either we're born into the culture, Buddhist culture, that's one aspect of it, but even then it's the encounter with Buddhism isn't yet fully real, even for many Asian people born in Buddhist cultures. And what it takes for Buddhism to become more real and meaningful is when one encounters suffering in one's life. And very often, I think it's not that unusual. You'll see, say, in Asia, you're somebody born into a Buddhist family in a Buddhist culture, and maybe learn something about the Four Noble Truths at school, and you kind of putter along and go to a monastery on, Songkran, when it's kind of New Year's festival, or maybe on Visakha Puja, on the Buddha's birth and death day, his enlightenment day. But it's not until sometimes we come across something that's very challenging and very difficult, whether it's through direct encounter, like we actually come across something very difficult in our life, which we have to find the tools to deal with. Or maybe sometimes it might be more on the level of, from a reflective side. It's like one just notices, looks around and sees beings in distress and say in poverty, and situations that one says to oneself, that must be so difficult to be in that kind of situation. And then one starts to reflect, well, what would I do if I were in that situation? And often enough, when this kind of question comes to me, the response is, I have no idea. That's on one level, that's the response. I don't know what I'd do. That would be extremely difficult. And so too tonight, everybody has come here, and it's New Year's Eve, so it's a bit special. So you might kind of be in a good mood because of that. But for a lot of us, there might be this kind of background discontent, which is not uncommon at all in modern society. This background sense of lack and incompleteness, the sense that you're looking for something. Still others may be either in this room, or this may go on the internet, and who knows who might be listening to it, and there might be people in despair, absolute despair, at the end of their rope, not knowing how to cope, if they can cope with the difficulties they're experiencing. Still others may be just like in a spiritual despair. It's sort of like what to believe, what to trust, who to trust. Does anybody have any idea what's going on in this world? For the monastics, sometimes doubts creep up. Should I remain as a monk? Should I disrobe? Should I find a Tibetan teacher? All these different doubts that might come up. Different ages, people in different age groups, some people in their 70s, 80s, perhaps. Health failing. Really at the end of life, perhaps, coming to the final chapter. Still others may be so fresh and young that it's still not really even clear to them that death is real. They've yet to have a parent die or a grandparent die, no death in the family, and still quite unaware of what life can bring and the difficulties and pain that life can sometimes bestow on us. When we're young, it's very difficult to imagine just how difficult life can be. So that's what brings us together. And sometimes it's kind of curious being in a situation where we're teaching the Dhamma, giving public talks like this. How do you address? Because obviously, to me, suffering is the most important question of life. I mean, why is it that we suffer? What is suffering? And not on an abstract level, but for one thing, why is it that I suffer? But then on a bigger question, what is suffering? And that's what brings most of us here, in one way or another, some aspect of this question. And it's hard to gauge, to respond to that, and to think, there's, say, 30 or 40 people here, and everyone is suffering on different levels, some extreme, some hardly at all. How do you address the issue? And it's a challenge. We just recently completed a building project, a workshop, and while it's not a particularly elaborate building, it's elaborate enough that for those of us who have no, say, engineering experience or architecture experience, it's an incredible feat that people can sort of plan this out. And if you went down there and looked at the building when it was being built, and these kind of how everything is lining up together, and you got the rafters and the beams and the two, it's kind of 2 levels, 2 floors, and you've got the different doors, and so much goes into it, so much planning. And if we didn't have that kind of a map, that sort of plan in advance, there's no way you could build a building like that, at least not as far as I can tell. I mean, it would be, if you just kind of showed up there with with a hammer and some nails and some wood, you would wind up with nothing like what we have. You'd have a complete, at best you could have a little lean-to or something, but you could not have a beautiful building at the end of it. And I think this is, say, a good analogy for our lives. And one of the reasons why suffering comes upon us is because we have been given this map in life, either by society or by our parents. We have this map, and this map, we were told if we did certain things, A, B, C, D, that we'd be happy. And to put it simply, successful maps are hard to come by. And certainly, say, from the religious perspective, you have like theistic maps, the sense that some being is in control. He's got some sort of plan kind of laid out for the cosmos, and the world is unfolding according to his plan. That's a map that I would consider quite imperfect. Something I have a difficult time accepting, for sure. Then there's another map which says no one's in control. You have basically nothing but atoms and material matter in the universe, and the universe is just sort of bouncing along aimlessly. Consciousness is nothing more than a product of molecules and atoms being kind of positioned in a certain way, and as a result you have consciousness, and there's a certain vacuum to that view as well that is quite despairing for me, at least. And so Buddhism proposes or suggests that a map is available, that's a healthy map and a reasonable map, and one which stands on a sound foundation, and that it's something that's a bit unique and it's different from other maps that you see in the world. On the one hand, it's not a map that requires blind belief. So you're not told to believe in anything in Buddhism. To believe in something or to not believe in something, it's not It's not a sin against any being. It's not a sin against God. If you question the teachings, that's a sign of, well, it could be a sign of a few things, but it certainly can be a sign of wisdom. And one thing that is certain is that wisdom cannot develop unless you have an inquisitive mind, a mind which is willing to question. You can be sure that when you start Buddhism, when you are new to the teachings, in fact, even when you're not new to the teachings, as long as you're not enlightened, you've got some wrong ideas in your head, some wrong views, and that should be the given. That sort of helps to humble you a little bit. It's not the case that you've got it figured out already, and you just got to confirm. You practice the path so that you can just confirm to yourself what you already know. There's a fundamental misunderstanding that practitioners have when they come to this path. It has to be that way. And that leads to, reflecting on this leads to a certain humility. So as far as I can tell, in the world, if you want to talk about, say, a good map on a sort of relative level, relative plane, or in the plane of controlling the world, if you want to control the world, science is a fairly good map. Scientific experiments, to be able to put something to a test, and having tested it, you draw a conclusion. You kind of create a hypothesis, an idea as to what may be true, what may not be true. You devise a way to test it. You test it. You draw a conclusion, and then you verify it through experiments. And if the heart were, I just want to say that Buddhism is a religion that teaches that everything that we experience comes about through causality. So whether it's happiness or suffering, the various things that we experience in our life comes about through causality. But because the causality that goes into producing any given moment is so complex and so rich, it can never be figured out on an intellectual level. It just cannot. Now, we could say theoretically it could be, perhaps. I mean, maybe there's a finite number of causes that go into the present moment, maybe not, I don't know. But one thing that I believe very strongly, there's some very intelligent people I know who are unhappy, extraordinarily intelligent people. And it's not that they lack the ability to kind of notice patterns in the world. So Buddhism, it has to be, eventually we have to come to a point where, although it's taught in terms of, say, the logic of language and causality, and it's a very rational teaching on many levels, there comes a time when you have to put that down. And you have to be willing to not know. And if you're always looking to know something before you can trust it, you're basically really limiting yourself. You're really limiting yourself. It's sort of like it doesn't matter how intelligent you are and how sort of far-seeing your ability to think things through might be. As long as you are thinking things through and then acting on it because you think you understand it, you're going to be in a very sort of narrow, confined sort of room, a very small state of consciousness. You just think about, say, an example, say something like a sense of humor. the difference between, let's say you have a joke you want to tell, you think is a funny joke, and you sort of tell this joke. And, a joke that is told just never has the same sort of vitality and specialness and life to it that a joke which is something that kind of comes up totally spontaneously, kind of out of the blue, kind of even surprise the person who said it. There's a certain kind of vitality to that a joke simply it does not have, it cannot have. And it's kind of the same way with happiness, that happiness that is planned out. And you think if you do X, Y, and Z, and then you'll be happy. I mean, even if it kind of works, just the same way like some jokes can kind of be funny, perhaps. But a real sense of well-being, it has to have a sort of relaxed quality to it. This quality of you letting go. It has to have this quality of letting go to it. And when we hold on to things like rationality, and we think that rationality is going to lead us to happiness, it always turns up dry. It always leads to maybe a certain kind of well-being. You might be able to use rationality to explain to yourself why you should be a good person. You might be able to explain to yourself why you should meditate, why you should be kind to your husband or wife. But all of this stuff, it's kind of like, there's a famous philosopher said, like the die is already cast. You've by the time the logic comes up to explain what should or should not be done, you've already committed yourself to doing or not doing something. So let's contrast that with, say, kamma, good kamma. Again, good kamma is not that you don't use the thinking mind at all. But there is a kind of good kamma which is very profound, and it's the sort of good kamma where there's a positive intention, a loving intention, a good intention that arises in you spontaneously, and you act on it. It simply arises and you go with it. As soon as it comes up, it's like you trust it and you act on it. And that's got a sort of freshness to it and a richness to it. It's not premeditated. It's not something that you've worked out in your head. It's simply something that you trust. And you can't plan this out. You can't say to yourself, okay, now I think what I'll do is tonight, when I get home, I'll spontaneously do something really good. It doesn't work like that. It's when some kind of spontaneous urge arises in you that is beautiful, you've got to be sharp and you've got to recognize it, because it comes up in all of us from time to time. And of course, when it comes up, it's very beautiful, it's very wonderful. It's like this might arise in us. But in order for it to arise in the future, we can't calculate our way into it. We simply have to nourish it. Every time it arises, we have to trust. We have to say, right, there it is. There's a good intention there. There's something beautiful that's just arisen. And let me seize the opportunity. In fact, you don't even have to think about it this way. You've got to trust yourself to act on it. You act on it. And it's through acting on it in that way that starts to gain strength. And it starts to develop a sort of pattern, its own sort of habit, its own momentum, its own rhythm. And the results of that sort of trust I think is very far-reaching. And it has a knock-on effect that you can't anticipate. When you see somebody acting on a trusting, a good intention, they act on it and they speak on it. It can ripple through sort of the collective consciousness. It kind of moves through beings in ways that you may not at all understand or comprehend. But that's okay. You don't have to, and that's That's the whole point here. Is this developing the sensitivity to oneself and recognizing, discerning within oneself what's a wholesome intention, and whenever that arises, to nourish it, to trust it, to seize the opportunity, and to roll with it. There's a sutta. Can't remember the name. I think it's the Prince Bodhi Sutta. And the Buddha is talking about striving, about putting forth effort. And he's talking about, it's true that some people find putting forth effort easier than others. And the Buddha is asked, what are the conditions that help support putting forth effort? And he gives a list of 5 qualities. And this just comes to me now for some reason. I hope I can recall the 5. The first one is faith. The second one is, if I'm not mistaken, sincerity. I may have the numbers here mixed up, but there's faith, sincerity, good health. Faith, sincerity, good health. I think one of them might be energy. And the last one is wisdom. And these are, I think the Buddha calls these factors of striving. And the person who posed the question, I think it might have been Prince Janusoni, but I can't recall. He says, I think he trains horses. And the Buddha says, what do you think, Prince, what do you think? If you were training somebody to ride a horse, that's right, he trains horse riders, something like that. Anyways, if you were to train somebody how to ride a horse, if they didn't have faith, if they didn't have energy, if they weren't sincere, if they weren't in good health, if they had no wisdom, would you easily be able to train that person? And he says, well, no, of course not. They'd have to have those 5 qualities, or at least some of them. And the Buddha says so too. In this dispensation, when I train monastics or lay people, these 5 qualities are qualities that are sort of conditions for striving, sort of ground conditions for striving. So I think this is, we're starting a new year now, and we might be able to say that we can take away these 5 qualities and think of it as a kind of map in our lives. A sort of structure that we can refer to, something that we're going to care for in our lives, because these are an important foundation among many different kinds of foundations that we have in the Buddhist teachings. Faith in the Buddha. I mean, just think, if somebody has faith in the Buddha, they trust that what the Buddha said is true, that the Buddha actually existed, and he said something that was meaningful and valuable to ourselves as practitioners. If somebody believed that deeply, versus somebody who, doesn't really think about it too much and just sort of interested in trying out meditation, the results are going to be very different. Sort of obvious. If you have somebody who's committed to being the best that they can in their life, that you have this one life, as far as we know, it's kind of this incarnation, this existence of ours, it only comes once. And it's precious, it's valuable, and we don't want to waste it. We don't want to whittle away the time. We want to care for time. Time is valuable, life is valuable. If somebody has that attitude versus somebody who sort of sees time as just something to kill. Time, I can't do anything anyways, nothing's really going to come of my life, so just kind of sit around and let the days go by. Again, these are two very different mental states. Sincerity, such a valuable thing. Sincerity, it's sort of like what I was saying just a minute ago about when you have this intention to do something good, you have to just trust it. You have to act on it just spontaneously. And sincerity is something similar. How do you cultivate sincerity? Seems like a funny question. Because if you have to cultivate it, that suggests that maybe you're not sincere to begin with. And sincerity doesn't seem like it's something that's subject to cultivation. And I think it's similar. It's like whenever you sense whatever it is within you that's sincere, as soon as you recognize it, you have to make much of it. Something beautiful, something absolutely beautiful to the human heart is a sincere heart. Somebody who can speak, just kind of put the words out there, and that's that. And there's the way it is. And one of the things that also is, let's face it, something that is something that brings us to sincerity quickly is suffering. And when life gets difficult, that's all you can almost say. That's what brings us around to, it kind of wakes us up. It's like throwing water in our face, and it brings us to a kind of state of sincerity. When life is easy and everything's going well, and job is going well, family is going well, it's easy to just start kind of drifting, and you're sort of disconnected from your heart. As soon as you lose a loved one, suddenly you know what it means to be sincere. That's real, for example. So sincerity is something that we want to value and care for and nourish and encourage in ourselves and in others as much as we can. Good health. This is lovely, this kind of practical side of the Buddha that comes out every now and then. Right, of course. If you're in good health, you're much more in a position to, strive, meditation. It's much easier to put up with hardships, say, the difficulties that you encounter in life. Good health is a great blessing, and it's so easy to take for granted when you don't have it. Wait a minute. It's easy to take for granted when you do have it. So to recognize, it's not just caring for your health, which is valuable, but also appreciating your health when you have it. Saying, okay, right, right now this body is healthy, and it's not going to be like this for long. Trust me. And since now it is healthy, what are you going to do with it? It's sort of similar to time. The preciousness of health and time and life kind of all meld together in a sense. And so the preciousness of health is none other than our capacity to achieve something that's meaningful. It's very related. It's not, however, a necessary condition. It's not. Certainly, it's the case. Unlike the other factors in this list, if you are in bad health, it is still definitely possible to practice and to strive. Even if you're bedridden, even if you are, as long as you're conscious, it is possible to practice. But health is such an advantage. So to take advantage while you have it, and to remind yourself that it won't be long before it will go its way and you'll go your way. And so when you lose it, you can have some equanimity, for it's going to happen. And then wisdom, this is another thing. It's sort of like both the starting point and ending point of our practice. That in us which wants to be enlightened, that in us which wants to be free of suffering, I mean, that's right there. It's a very powerful seed. It's the seed of wisdom. And so on the one hand, you start with that kind of longing for truth, that longing for wisdom and peace, and recognize that that's actually, at the same time, that's what we're aiming for, is wisdom. It could be said that if you have wisdom, you have everything. So wisdom is like, it's both like the seed and the fruit. So we can think about these 5 things. It's like these are 5 things to treasure, to value, to care for. And we're going into a new year now, 2012, in just 2.5 hours. And, we can think about these 5 things and ask ourselves, are these things strong in our life? And can we nourish them? And how do we nourish them? Just simply the intention to care for them, already, just that in itself is priceless. And, you'll screw up. Sometimes you'll succeed. Sometimes you'll fail. Sometimes you'll make mistakes. And it's, it's important to get just, you make a mistake and you just get right back on it, get back on the practice. There's that lovely story Ajahn Yatiko tells of an Aikido master. How's it go? Something like, there's this Aikido master and he's brilliant and he's got his perfect balance and the student is kind of a bit intimidated, and he says, I'll never be able to do that. I mean, you just never lose your balance. And the master says, I never lose my balance. He goes, I'm losing my balance all the time. My skill doesn't lie in the fact that I never lose my balance. My skill lies in the speed with which I recover my balance. And that's a lovely sort of way to reflect on our practice. Because no matter how off balance you are, it's not like you screwed up and therefore things are a mess and you can't practice. It's like right now is your chance to practice through bringing yourself back to a state of balance, kind of realigning yourself with meaningful priorities and meaningful aims in life. If you find yourself going off to an extreme of, say, greed, or taking things that you don't really have a right to, in the business world, this is not uncommon. Or you find yourself slipping into aversion and kind of angry with your neighbors, with your partner, angry with yourself, disappointed in yourself. These are all unwholesome mind states, If you've made a mistake, or if someone else has made a mistake, you want to make it conscious. If you've made the mistake, try and be conscious of it. If someone else has made the mistake, try and just share it, out of compassion, find the right time and place to share it with them. Share your perceptions, and then let it go. Don't carry it around. Don't neither of yourself or of other people. So nurturing these things, nurturing your faith, your energy, caring for your health, caring for your sincerity, and valuing wisdom. This can be like a roadmap, the architectural drawing for the rest of our life in Buddhist practice. So I think I'll end the talk there. And tonight, being the New Year's Eve, we thought we would practice tonight till midnight, actually till 11:45. And at 11:45 we'll do a little ceremony. The monks will chant the parittas, and maybe it's 10 or 15 minutes of chanting. Lay people can meditate while we chant. Just a sort of way of of letting go of the year that's behind us, putting it down, letting it be like a bit of a ceremony, bringing in the new year with a sense of commitment, sense of something, starting the year off in a beautiful foot, if you will. Anyways, whatever, that's what we'll try doing. And I think I'll end the talk there.